When you get to a senior level in product management, the job, it just completely changes. It's not about shipping features anymore. It's about staring down these massive, messy, ambiguous problems. You know the kind, where the path forward is anything but clear and the stakes are incredibly high. So, how do the best PMs turn all that ambiguity into real, concrete action? Let's break down their playbook.
This question. It's a classic for a reason. It's designed to push the very limits of your strategic thinking. I mean, we are talking about a product that could literally reshape cities, economies, and our daily lives. There's no single right answer here, but there is a right way to approach the answer. And that's the real secret. The interviewer doesn't actually care about your detailed go-to-market plan for autonomous vehicles. What they're really looking for is a window into how your mind works. They want to see evidence of a structured, logical, and creative process. They want to see how you think. It's not about the what, it's all about the how.
So, how do you show off that strategic mind, especially when you're under pressure? Well, you don't just wing it. The most effective product leaders, they all rely on a personal decision-making compass. It's a framework that guides them from a really complex question to a recommendation they can actually defend.
This right here highlights a key differentiator for senior PMs. See, it's not enough to just have a framework in your head. You have to be able to articulate it. This is how you build trust. It shows your team and your leadership that your decisions are rooted in solid logic, not just a random gut feeling.
Now let's be really clear about what we mean by a framework. This is not some rigid script you follow blindly. Not at all. Think of it as your secret weapon, a reliable structure you can apply to almost any fuzzy, high-stakes problem to break it down into manageable pieces and make sure you don't miss anything critical.
Okay, so let's get practical. What does one of these frameworks actually look like? While the goal is for you to develop your own, most of the great ones follow a really similar, logical flow. So let's walk through a synthesized method you can use as a starting point.
So here's how it usually builds. First, you clarify what success even looks like and what your limitations are. Time, money, tech, whatever. Then you go deep on the user. Who are they, and what problems are you really solving for them? And notice, only then do you start brainstorming solutions. The crucial part, the one people always rush, is step 4, evaluating the trade-offs. You have to do that before you finally summarize the recommendation with a really clear why.
And this is the real power of a framework. Following a structure like this forces you to consider all these different strategic dimensions. You can't just forget about the competitive landscape or ignore the pricing strategy, because the framework is there to prompt you to make sure you address them. It turns what could be a scattered brainstorm into a really comprehensive analysis.
All right, let's move away from theory and into a real-world battlefield of product decisions. And there's really no better place to look than Amazon, a company famous for its customer centricity, but also for its fierce business drive. This brings us to a classic and highly controversial decision.
This is such a fantastic question because it pits two core business principles directly against each other. On one hand, you've got the potential for absolutely massive revenue. But on the other, you risk degrading that pristine, customer-focused shopping experience that made Amazon a giant in the first place. So, what do?
Well, you start by clearly laying out the two sides of the coin. The arguments for ads are incredibly powerful. New revenue streams, diversifying the business, and monetizing the insane amount of traffic Amazon already has. But the arguments against are just as compelling: a cluttered user interface, a potential loss of customer trust, and even a conflict of interest, promoting a worse product just because they paid for an ad.
This is where the framework really helps you move beyond just simple opinion. A top PM would break this decision down by key criteria. How does each option serve the business goals? What's the customer impact? How does it play to Amazon's core strengths? By analyzing it this way, you can arrive at a much more nuanced recommendation, like, let's proceed but with rigorous A/B testing to validate the real impact.
Okay, so knowing the frameworks is one thing. Applying them with actual insight is a whole other level. This is where a lot of aspiring PMs stumble. So let's look at the common traps that separate a pretty good answer from a truly great one.
You know, the biggest mistake by far is treating the framework like a checklist you just have to get through. For example, a PM might suggest a cool solution, but completely failed to connect it back to the business goal. That's how you build a feature that users love, but that gets its budget cut next quarter. Or they'll ignore constraints, proposing a perfect solution that's totally impossible to build. The goal isn't just to fill in the boxes, it's to use the structure to force deeper thinking before you land the plane with a clear recommendation.
So, what does this all add up to? Using frameworks consistently and thoughtfully isn't just an interview trick. It's the absolute foundation of an elite product mindset. It's what allows you to transition from being just a feature manager to a true product strategist.
The top PMs are obsessed with solving the right problems. They think in portfolios of bets. They know some initiatives are going to fail, but the winners will pay for everything else. They demand data-backed analysis for every single major trade-off, and they can articulate the why behind any decision to anyone, from an engineer to the CEO. Ultimately, their influence comes directly from the clarity and the rigor of their thinking.
So I'll leave you with this challenge. Think about the most ambiguous, complex, messy problem on your plate right now. Instead of just diving in, take a step back. Ask yourself, what framework can I apply to deconstruct this problem and find a clearer path forward? That's the first step to making your next high-stakes decision a strategic masterstroke.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe and like.